Patients who are declared to be brain dead should be taken off of life support because of its high cost, the need for organ donation, and the impossibility of spontaneous recovery. Families are burdened enough when it comes to a loved one being brain dead. They do not need the additional burden of having to decide whether or not to remove their loved one from their life-saving care. Policy needs to be implemented in hospitals everywhere so that when a brain death diagnosis is declared, a specific procedure is in place to terminate any life-prolonging initiatives that are based purely on medical testing. It will allow families to grieve without feeling like they had to unplug someone they love and give them a timeline without room for error or feeling guilty for making a life or death decision.
Brain death. Brain death is not the same as being in a coma or a vegetative state. Brain death, by definition, is irreversible. Now, in the United States and most places, it is legally synonymous with death, the same as if your heart stops. But brain death means a total loss of brain activity. Now, to determine it, doctors will often do several things. A physical exam, for example, shine light into the pupils and see, do they dilate, do they move and constrict? Gently rub the eyeball with some cotton and see if the eye reacts that way. Sometimes they'll put ice water into the ears and see if the eyes move in a particular fashion. These are all tests of the brain stem. They'll also do something known as an apnea test. That means they turn off the ventilator for several minutes and see if the person shows any signs of breathing on their own. As confirmation, oftentimes they'll do scans to check to see if there's blood flow to the brain and also test to see if there's electrical activity from the brain. But again, it's that detailed clinical neurological exam that is so important. Now, coma, if it goes on for an extended period of time, is called a vegetative state. And there's a fair amount of interesting research in this area. In a rare handful of cases, for example, people who have been in a vegetative state for years have returned to some level of consciousness. This is rare, but it does happen. But again, brain death is something else entirely. There is no activity in the brain. There is no blood flow to the brain. It is a grim situation, but again, something that a trained doctor can pretty easily diagnose.
According to the Uniform Determination of Death Act that was drafted by the National Conference of Commissioners states, an individual that has sustained irreversible cessation of all functions of the entire brain, including the brainstem, is dead. Brain death is commonly confused with the persistent vegetative state, which is also known as a coma. The main difference between the two is the levels of brain activity. When a person is brain dead, they have no brain activity whatsoever. However, when a person is in persistent vegetative state, they have minimal but some brain activity. A patient who has suffered an injury that is so severe that causes their brain to stop working will only be able to breathe and have a heartbeat if they are placed on a life-sustaining machine. For example, in the case of a persistent vegetative state, Terry Wallace was thrown from his truck in the year 1984, suffering major brain damage. However, 19 years later, he awoke from his vegetative state and was able to regain some of his abilities. Because he was in a persistent vegetative state and not brain dead, waking up from his coma was possible, unlike its impossibility in brain death.
Vegetative state, coma, and brain dead are used interchangeably, but they are not synonymous, and there are very important distinctions. People in a vegetative state still have a functioning brain stem, meaning their body is essentially on autopilot. They can breathe on their own, have a sleep-wake cycle, and react to some stimuli, but they can't hold a conversation or take in their environment. Neurologists define consciousness by wakefulness and awareness, and people in a vegetative state are awake but unaware. People in a coma, on the other hand, are not awake or aware. Comas can happen either if their cerebral hemispheres aren't working, or if the reticular activating system, the part of the brain stem responsible for wakefulness, is damaged. Then people enter a state of deep unconsciousness, like the most hardcore nap ever taken. Still under the surface, though, their brain is at a minimum sending out some signals. It's possible to recover from a coma into a vegetative state and then regain awareness. Unfortunately, it is also possible to progress from a coma to a state where all neural activity ceases and the brain no longer has any input on the body's function. This is called brain death. Brain death does have another name in the medical community: death. Someone in a vegetative state or a coma is still considered alive, but brain death is irreversible. So doctors go through a series of tests known as the brain death examination before officially determining that person is in fact brain dead.
Once being declared brain dead, the body will begin to deteriorate and the brain will begin to liquefy. Life support for patients of this condition will only prolong the process of dying. The cost of supporting someone who is brain dead comes at both a monetary and emotional price. According to Sabria Rice's 2014 Brain Dead Pregnant Women Removed from Life Support article, a 2014 study found that providing long-term care for a patient receiving mechanical ventilation cost around $5,233 per day. A stay in the intensive care unit can range anywhere between $3,000 to $6,000 per day. The emotional price paid by the family of the brain-dead patient far exceeds that of any monetary cost. Problems arise when an insurance company refuses to pay for a dead person's body to be maintained, and thus policies are maxed out since the insurance will not pay for the treatments. Many doctors and hospitals believe that it is not right to treat a dead body because it is leading the person's loved ones to believe that there is still a chance when in reality there is not. An example of this is found in the case of a 13-year-old brain-dead girl. In Max Ehrenfriend's 2013 article, Brain Dead Girl Could Be Removed from Life Support Despite Family's Wishes, states that physicians at Children's Hospital and elsewhere agree that treating a corpse is unethical, and the family has apparently failed to find another facility willing to keep McMath's body connected to a ventilator given that she is dead.
Not trying to go in her room and do anything to her.
Naila Winkfield spoke with us only a moment before rushing back to the bedside of her 13-year-old daughter, Jahai, who came to Children's Hospital last Monday to have her tonsils removed. But there were complications. After surgery, she suffered a heart attack. Medical staff revived her, but doctors say she is brain dead.
A brain death diagnosis often leaves families heartbroken and with feelings of guilt. No person should ever have to decide when to end their loved one's life. Having the decision of someone's life in their hands is beyond stressful. In an already overwhelming time for the family, they should not be forced to make such a loaded decision. A process should be put in place to ease the burden on the family and to give them the time they need to grieve, not to make any necessary decisions. The brain dead also provide others with a second chance at life, despite losing their own. A person is able to donate their organs as soon as they have been declared dead and removed from life support. There is a window of time that is best for the donation to take place, which is only minutes after the person has been removed from their life support machines. After the process of extracting the organs from the body takes place, the organs are put on ice and given to the personnel in charge of transporting them to the person in need. By donating their organs, a person can save so many lives. A 2015 article found on donatelifeny.org titled All About Donation, it is stated that one organ donor can save up to 8 lives. The same donor can also save or improve the lives of up to 50 people by donating tissues. Patients who are declared as brain dead should be removed from life support because they are, in fact, dead and have the ability to help give others a second chance at life. Dealing with brain death is difficult and is not something anyone should have to think about going through. A specific procedure needs to be put in place to ease the financial and emotional burden for everyone involved in the matter of a brain death diagnosis. In his 2013 article, Recovery of Organs Based on Brain Death is Ethical, James Du Bois states that there is no documented case of patient ever recovering from brain death.